My name is Seraphine Vale, 42 years old. The digital clock on my dashboard flashed midnight as I pulled into our driveway. Christmas Eve had officially arrived, though the holiday spirit had abandoned me somewhere between the third cardiac arrest and the fifth car accident victim at Oregon Regional. My shoulders ached after a 14-hour shift in the trauma unit, my scrubs bearing the invisible weight of other people's tragedies. I fumbled with my house key, expecting darkness. Michael was away on business until tomorrow morning, and Maya had texted earlier about heading to my parents for their annual Christmas Eve dinner. The thought of my 16-year-old daughter spending time with family had been the one bright spot in my exhausting day. When I pushed open the door, soft lamplight spilled across our living room. My breath caught. Maya lay curled on the sofa, still wearing her winter coat, her face partially hidden beneath a cascade of dark hair. Her chest rose and fell in the shallow rhythm of troubled sleep. On the coffee table sat an untouched plate of food and a container of her homemade sugar cookies, the ones she'd spent all yesterday afternoon perfecting for her grandparents. "Maya," I whispered, kneeling beside her. Her eyelids fluttered open. For an instant, raw vulnerability flashed across her face before she tried to cover it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, Mom," she said, her voice cracked. "You're home early. What happened, sweetheart?" I brushed hair from her forehead, noticing the crumpled dress beneath her coat, the one she'd spent weeks choosing, the one she'd tried on for me 4 times, asking if it was nice enough for Grandma's fancy dinner. The dress was wrinkled now, the delicate fabric bearing the evidence of hours spent curled in defeat on our sofa. As she sat up, the lamplight caught the faint tracks of dried tears along her cheeks. "Nothing happened," she shrugged, reaching for nonchalance and missing by miles. "I just didn't stay very long." I took her hands. They were cold. "Please tell me." Her eyes dropped to our intertwined fingers. "Grandma said there was no room at the table." My heart stopped. "What?" she swallowed. "There were a lot of people there, neighbors, Dad's cousins, even Grandma's bridge club friends." The image formed with painful clarity. My daughter, driving herself to her grandparents' home in the car she'd only had for 3 months, proudly carrying gifts and cookies, expecting to be welcomed into the warmth of family tradition. "I drove over around 6, she continued, words tumbling now. "I parked where Uncle Jack always parks, you know? I checked my hair in the mirror like 100 times. I nodded, my throat tight. Grandma opened the door with that smile. She flicked a glance at me. "You know the one," and she said, "Oh, we weren't expecting you until your mother arrived." The familiar cold spread through my chest, the chill that always accompanied interactions with my mother. Helen Morgan, master of the subtle rejection disguised as practicality. "I could see everyone at the table," Maya said. "They had the leaves in, like for Thanksgiving." 26 people, Mom. I counted. Aunt Carla and Uncle Jack and all their kids, Mrs. Peterson from next door, and Mr. and Mrs. Lambert from the Bridge Club. I closed my eyes, already knowing the ending. "Grandma told me there wasn't a chair for me," Maya said softly. "They hadn't set a place because they thought I was coming with you later. She said the guest room was full of coats, but I could wait in the kitchen if I wanted." My hands trembled. Somewhere outside, rain ticked against the gutters. Inside, the refrigerator hummed, steady and indifferent. "Aunt Carla pretended to be really interested in the potatoes," Maya whispered. "So I left the gifts and cookies and said I'd see them tomorrow." "You drove home in the rain." It wasn't a question. I'd driven through the same storm. "It wasn't so bad," she murmured. But it was. It was bad in ways my 16-year-old shouldn't have to understand. The familiar weight of family obligation pressed down on me, the same weight I'd carried since childhood. I had spent 8 years paying the mortgage and utilities on the house my parents lived in, the house I'd purchased when Dad lost his job and they faced foreclosure. 8 years of monthly checks accompanied by barbed comments about how I'd abandoned the family for my fancy nursing degree. My father's voice, a reflexive echo. "You think you're better than us." My sister Carla's constant refrain. "Must be nice to abandon family for education." Every gathering laced with jokes that cut. Every holiday heavy with unspoken resentment. For years I'd been the peacekeeper, smoothing feathers. making excuses, writing checks. I'd endured because that's what family did. Because walking away felt crueler than staying. I helped Maya to her feet and gently removed her coat, the lining warm from hours of being worn in a room that should have made it unnecessary. "They didn't run out of chairs, Mom," Maya said, voice small but steady. "They just didn't want me there." My hands went still. In the quiet, a single paper star on the coffee table, detached from the string she'd glued for the cookie tin, tilted and fell over. The smallest things tell the truth. "What did Grandma say to you exactly?" I asked. Maya hesitated. She said, "I'm expensive to keep entertained. That you and I are always needy." But then she smiled, like a joke. A slow, precise ache opened under my sternum. That sentence lodged like a sliver of glass, catching light I hadn't wanted to see. I tucked her into bed like when she was little, though her long limbs reached to the edges of the quilt my grandmother had made decades ago. I watched her eyelids grow heavy with the emotional exhaustion of the evening. "Never again, sweetheart," I whispered. "Never again." She drifted off, her breath evening. I stood in the doorway longer than necessary, anchored by the sight of her safety. The house was so quiet I could hear the baseboard heat creak. A plate of food sat untouched on the table, the sugar cookies in their wax paper container pristine. She had planned to place them in the center of my mother's china. Instead, they rested here like evidence. In the kitchen, I rinsed a glass and stared at the window's black pane. My reflection hovered like a stranger. Somewhere between the third cardiac arrest and the fifth car accident victim, I had learned how to decide fast under pressure. Somewhere between childhood and tonight, I had learned to be slow when it came to myself. The difference felt damning. I opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet in my small home office and pulled out a faded manila folder. Then another. Then the tidy stack I kept out of habit rather than intention. Property tax statements, insurance, utility receipts, transfers to my sister. The neat rows of numbers in my checkbook register ran across years like cadence marks on a battlefield. Won $300. I traced one column with my finger, letting the neat ink anchor me. The house was solely in my name. I had told myself the arrangement was temporary, then merciful, then necessary. Tonight, it felt like something else, a table I'd built and set and paid for, where my daughter had no seat. My phone buzzed on the desk. A calendar reminder I didn't remember setting. Technician, bedroom camera service window, 1 to 4 p.m. I stared at it. I'd been meaning to repair the old camera we'd installed when Maya first started staying home alone after school. I hadn't told Michael the company had called back to confirm the appointment. The reminder blinked, innocent and precise. A small thing. Insignificant. Until it wasn't. The word room pulsed in my mind. Room at the table, room in the calendar, room in our lives. Who decides where the chairs go? Who pays for the chairs? Who gets to sit? I poured the cookies from their container onto a plate, laid them out the way Maya would have wanted, circles aligned, sugar catching the lamplight like frost. Beside them, I arranged the documents into gentle piles, property tax here, utilities there, tuition and gifts in another. I snapped a photo of the table for no reason I could name, then another from farther back. Evidence wants a witness. I thought of Sarah Williams, my attorney friend, the one who had helped me close on my parents' house years ago. Sarah, with her legal pad and calm voice and laser gaze that called things by their right names. I scrolled through my contacts, stopped on her name, didn't press call, not yet. Time felt strange, thin and loud. In the hallway, a floorboard creaked. Maya's door remained closed, a faint line of light slipping out under the frame. I remembered her journal, the little leather one I'd found while changing her sheets last month, the one I hadn't read because I still believed privacy could protect us from pain. When she'd told me, "It's fine," she had not looked at me. She was trying to protect me, my child, protecting me from my mother, from my sister, from my father's silence. The realization settled not like thunder, but like snow, soft and relentless, changing the shape of everything. I sat at the kitchen table again and let the numbers speak. 8 years of being the safety net had trained me to accept their barbs as wind and my effort as rope. Tonight, the rope burned. I pictured that long table, leaves added, 26 chairs, a kitchen offered to my daughter like a broom closet for spare feelings. I pictured my mother's hands setting place cards with practiced grace, her smile wide enough to reach every guest but the granddaughter on the doorstep. I pictured the empty chairs at the end, because there are always extra chairs at Christmas, and understood with a clarity that made me steady. The table was never short on chairs. It was short on love. At 1:17 a.m., I sent one text. "Are you awake?" Sarah replied within a minute. "Always. ER work hard to shake. What happened?" I typed, then backspaced, then typed again, simpler, like charting vitals in a crisis. They told Maya there was no room at the table. I think I've been financing my daughter's erasure. A bubble appeared. "I'm coming by in the morning," she wrote. "Bring nothing. We'll start with what's true." I stared at the screen. Okay. I set the phone down and steadied my breath. The decision didn't arrive as a bang. It arrived like a door unlocking inside my chest. Not revenge, not punishment, protection. For Maya, for me, for the future we hadn't been allowed to imagine while I paid everyone else's bills. In the living room, the lamplight pooled over the cookies that no one at my mother's table had touched. In the office, the folders waited in tidy stacks. Upstairs, Maya slept under a quilt sewn by the great-grandmother who had never confused love with leverage. The house held its breath with me. Outside, rain softened to mist. Inside, clarity hardened to purpose. This was not about one dinner. It was about a child learning what she's worth from the people who should have taught her first. The only sound was the gentle tick of the thermostat, counting seconds between warmth. I stood, turned off the lamp, and said the vow out loud so the walls could keep me to it. Never again. The morning light broke pale and uncertain through the kitchen blinds, painting narrow stripes across the paperwork that now carpeted my table. Coffee steamed beside my elbow, untouched, going cold faster than I could think. Michael stood behind me in his t-shirt and jeans, hair tousled from the red-eye flight that had brought him home just before dawn. He didn't speak for a long while, just looked at the papers I'd arranged in neat, damning rows. "What am I looking at?" he finally asked. 8 years of numbers, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. 8 years of everything I've paid. I flipped through the checkbook register and the printed bank statements. Mortgage, except there isn't one. Utilities, property tax, maintenance, every month. He pulled out a chair and sat beside me. The sound of the chair legs scraping against the tile felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. "You bought that house outright," he said quietly. "I remember. You said it was for them to stay in temporarily until your dad got back on his feet." I nodded. That was the plan. He studied the columns of figures, his hand resting lightly over mine. "This isn't temporary anymore. This is servitude." The word hit me like truth always does, too sharp to deny. "I thought it was compassion," I whispered. He exhaled slowly. "Compassion doesn't require erasing yourself." The house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of rain easing off the roof. Maya still slept upstairs, her door cracked open just enough for the hallway light to slip through. I traced one line of ink with my fingertip, $1,300, neatly written, again, 8 years. "Over $100,000, Michael murmured, calculating. His voice held no blame, just disbelief. "Steph," he caught himself. "Seraphine, this isn't just generosity. This is theft wrapped in gratitude." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Sarah Williams. Her message was brief. On my way. "Bring coffee. I'll bring clarity." By the time she arrived, the morning had grown bright and sharp, the kind of light that makes dust visible. She took one look at the table and dropped her leather bag onto a chair. "This is what you meant by financing erasure, huh?" I nodded, suddenly aware of how surreal it was to have legal documents laid out between the remains of last night's cookies. Sarah flipped through the top folder. "Property is in your name." She tapped the deed with her pen. "No cosigners, no lien. They're tenants without a formal agreement. That means we can file a 60-day notice to vacate. Tenants? I echoed, the word strange on my tongue. It's what they are, legally speaking. Sarah's tone was firm, but not unkind. Emotionally, that's another battlefield. But in black and white terms, they live in your property rent-free. That gives you rights, even if they've convinced you otherwise. Michael poured her coffee. She's worried it's cruel, he said. Sarah looked up. Cruel is letting someone teach your daughter she doesn't belong. She turned another page. What's cruel is pretending kindness and martyrdom are the same thing. Her words cracked something open in me. Relief, grief, something older than either. We sat there for almost an hour, mapping next steps. She explained the procedure. Written notice, certified copy, legal language that sounded more like absolution than eviction. We'll keep it clean, she said. No drama, no confrontation. You serve notice, they move out. You end the financial bleed. Do you really think it'll be that simple? I asked. Sarah's smile was faint. Families like yours don't go quietly. They'll spin the story before the ink dries. They'll use guilt like a rope. Michael's hand tightened around his coffee cup. We're ready for that. But I wasn't sure I was, because despite everything, my body still carried decades of reflex. Apologize, placate, patch up. The habit of loyalty doesn't die cleanly. It frays and resists until you pull hard enough. Sarah gathered the papers into tidy stacks. Start documenting everything, she said. Every call, every text, every voicemail. They'll turn public when they can't control private. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. A new voicemail from my father. I didn't listen to it, but the preview on the screen read, "We need to talk about family obligations." My stomach turned. After Sarah left, Michael and I sat in silence. The evidence table gleamed in the cold winter light. You okay? He asked. I looked at him, at the man who had never once made me choose between peace and honesty. No, I said, but maybe that's a start. He nodded. Do you want to wake Maya? We could tell her what's happening. Not yet, I said. She's had enough truth for one night. I picked up the property tax statement again, my thumb running along the edge. Do you remember last Christmas, I asked, when Lily got that $1,000 laptop for her coding class? Michael's eyes darkened, and Maya asked for watercolor paper. Right. My throat felt tight. My mother called it a reasonable request, like modesty was the only way Maya could earn approval. I opened another folder. Receipts for Carla's kid's birthday gift, designer sneakers, gaming systems. Maya's name appeared in neat script only next to small amounts. $20 for art supplies, $35 for books. I pushed the papers away. They taught her she's worth less. Quietly, repeatedly. Michael leaned forward, elbows on the table. Then it's time you teach her something else. The phrase lingered, more command than comfort. I reached for Maya's leather journal. The spine creaked when I opened it. She had left it on her desk, unhidden now, maybe intentionally. On the marked pages were neat, slanted lines of ink. Grandma said my art award isn't real because everyone gets one, but the teacher said only one student from each high school. Cousin Lily got flowers. I got socks. Mom looked sad but didn't say anything. I turned the page. Thanksgiving. They took 2 cars, said there wasn't enough room for me. There was. Each line was a wound disguised as observation. My pulse slowed, heavy in my ears. Michael stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. She's been protecting you, he said, while you've been protecting them. I closed the journal, hands trembling. No more. We moved quietly after that. I stacked the folders in chronological order, labeling each spine with blue tape. Mortgage, utilities, tuition, gifts. By the time I was done, the table looked like an evidence board. Michael squeezed my shoulder. Sarah's right. They'll twist this. I know. They'll say you're ungrateful. I know. They'll call it betrayal. I met his eyes. Then let them. Outside, the rain had stopped. A weak sun glinted on the driveway, catching the reflection of my car. I thought of Maya standing in that same driveway last night, clutching her cookies, heart split between hope and humiliation. I went to her room. She stirred as I brushed hair from her face. Morning, she murmured. Morning, baby. How are you feeling? She blinked. Better. You? I hesitated. Decisive. She smiled sleepily. That's new. Yeah, I said, managing a smile. It is. I left her door half open as I walked back downstairs. The house smelled faintly of coffee and rain. The stack of folders waited. I sat and began writing a single line on the top of the first page. This isn't about one dinner, it's about Maya's worth. Michael returned from the porch with the mail. Guess what came, he said, holding up a plain envelope. Inside was a Christmas card from my parents. The front read, "Family is forever." Inside, my mother's handwriting looped neatly. "Hope you enjoyed your quiet little Christmas. Maybe next year we'll find room for you both." The sarcasm gleamed like glass under sunlight. Michael's expression hardened. "Do you want me to toss it?" "No." I placed the card on top of the evidence pile. "I want to remember exactly who I'm protecting her from." The clock on the microwave blinked 10:30 a.m. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's child squealed with laughter over a new sled. Inside our house, the only thing sliding was the last bit of guilt that had kept me still for years. I opened my laptop and began drafting a message to Sarah. "Please prepare the notice to vacate, effective immediately." Before pressing send, I hesitated. "Is this cruel?" I whispered. Michael, still by the window, turned to me. "Cruelty is pretending it's love." I pressed send. The cursor blinked twice, then the email disappeared from my outbox. The silence that followed was almost holy, like the pause between confession and absolution. When the phone rang again minutes later, I didn't need to check the caller ID. I knew it was my mother. I let it ring until it stopped. Then I unplugged the house phone entirely. In the reflection of the dark screen, I caught my own expression. Not angry, not afraid, just certain. Some people didn't deserve second chances. Some tables weren't worth having a seat at, and some chairs were better left empty. The first call came before sunrise. I didn't answer, but the voicemail icon pulsed like a heartbeat. When I finally listened, my father's voice filled the quiet kitchen, calm, deliberate, and heavy with practiced disappointment. "Seraphine, you're destroying this family over nothing. Your mother is beside herself. Please call us back so we can fix this." Nothing. The word sat like a stone in my chest. Maya's humiliation, my years of servitude, the quiet cruelty, none of it existed in their narrative. By noon, the calls multiplied. Uncle Robert asking what this nonsense was about evicting your parents. Aunt Susan suggesting I speak to Pastor Thomas about honoring thy father and mother. Cousin Beth hinting that people talk when family business gets ugly. Then came the Facebook post. Carla, ever the family diplomat, uploaded a photo of our parents' house, my house, with a caption that sliced cleaner than any knife. Prayers needed for my elderly parents, facing homelessness because my sister has forgotten what family means. Within hours, 17 relatives had shared it. Michael stood beside me as I read the comments aloud, my voice flat. Unbelievable. So selfish. Imagine doing that to your own blood. I scrolled lower. Didn't Seraphine always think she was better than everyone else? He reached for my phone and set it face down. Don't feed the fire. I laughed once, brittle. They built the fire, Michael. I just stopped supplying wood. Outside, rain streaked the window. The world was moving on as if my small rebellion meant nothing. But inside, the storm had only begun. At the hospital, I kept my head down during rounds, pretending not to notice the sidelong glances. Someone had told someone who told someone else, and now the gossip dripped like IV fluid, slow, invasive, impossible to ignore. "Heard about your folks," one nurse said carefully. "Hope everything works out." "Everything already is," I replied. When my shift ended, I walked toward the parking garage, keys clenched in my fist. The sound of footsteps echoed behind me. "Seraphine!" The voice sliced through the concrete air like a command. I turned. My mother stood near the stairwell, wrapped in her fur-lined coat, my father a few steps behind. The harsh fluorescent lights exaggerated every line in her face. "You can't hide behind lawyers forever," she snapped. "I'm not hiding," I said. "I'm working." She stepped closer. "After all we've done for you?" Something inside me went very still. "What you've done for me?" I repeated. "Do you mean the dinners I paid for? The mortgage I covered? The 8 years of pretending I owed you for existing?" Her nostrils flared. "We raised you, Seraphine. We sacrificed so much." Sacrifice isn't a receipt you cash in decades later. Dad shifted awkwardly. "Let's not do this here." But Helen was only warming up. "You're throwing your parents onto the street because your daughter didn't get special treatment at dinner. That's what this is about, isn't it? One dinner?" I took a slow breath. "Special treatment?" My voice echoed in the garage. "She's your granddaughter, Mom. You told her there wasn't room at the table." Helen's jaw tightened. "We didn't expect her until you arrived." There were 26 people there, I said, each word landing like a stone. Neighbors, bridge club members, people whose names she barely knows, but not her. For a heartbeat, silence filled the air. Then she hissed, "You've always been dramatic." 2 nurses from my unit passed by, eyes wide. One of them, Jennifer, paused. "Everything okay here?" "This is a private matter," Helen said sharply. Jennifer's gaze flicked to me. "Not when it's happening in our parking lot." Helen's mask slipped for a second, her eyes flashing. "You've poisoned everyone around you, Seraphine, even strangers." Jennifer folded her arms. "Or maybe people just see you clearly now." My mother turned on her heel, coat swirling like a curtain dropping at the end of a performance. Dad followed, silent as ever. I stood in the exhaust-scented air, my heart pounding, not from fear, but from something closer to freedom. That night, I sat at my desk and began building what Sarah had called the documentation wall. Every text, voicemail, screenshot. Bank statements, deed copies, utility records. The screen glowed with rows of files, cold, factual, indisputable. At the top of a new page, I wrote, Phase 2, Public Narrative. Because Sarah had been right. When they lose control of the private story, they'll rewrite the public one. The next morning, my phone pinged with a message from Pastor Thomas. "Can we talk today?" When I called, his voice was calm, deliberate. "Your mother spoke at prayer group last night." I closed my eyes. Of course she did. "She gave quite a performance," he said. "Tears, humility, all of it. But I reminded everyone that family stories are rarely one-sided." Something caught in my throat. "Thank you." "Boundaries aren't unchristian," he added. "Neither is protecting your child." The words landed like a benediction. That afternoon, I went to the bank. The manager, a polite man with kind eyes, looked uncomfortable as I explained my request. "You'd like to terminate all automatic transfers?" "Yes, mortgage, utilities, property tax, everything associated with this address." He blinked. "These have been active for 8 years." "I'm aware." I slid my ID across the desk. "They end today." He hesitated, as if expecting tears or second thoughts. But I was done performing remorse for other people's comfort. "Would you like printed statements of all prior payments?" "Yes," I said, "all of them." When I walked out of the bank, a weight I hadn't noticed lifted from my chest. It wasn't joy exactly, more like oxygen after years underwater. That evening, I created a folder on my laptop titled Proof. Inside it, I saved everything. Financial records, the Christmas card, screenshots of Carla's post, and the voicemail transcriptions. I added a note at the bottom of the file. Their tears never stopped them from hurting Maya. Why should mine stop me from protecting her? Michael knocked on his doorframe. "Security cameras arrived," he said, holding a box. "I'll install them tomorrow." I nodded. "Add Helen's visit to the incident log." He smiled faintly. "Already did." "She called your cell, didn't she?" His laugh was soft but humorless. "She told me I needed to control my wife. I told her I never have, and I'm not starting now." "Thank you." He reached for my hand. "Are you sure about this, Seraphine?" I met his eyes. "I've never been surer of anything." We stood there for a moment, just breathing the same air, the quiet hum of our home wrapping around us like a promise. "They had 26 people at that table," I said finally. Michael nodded. 26. "And no room for Maya." His hand tightened around mine. "Then let's make sure she never has to fight for space again." 3 days later, the process server delivered the certified eviction notice to my parents' Sunday dinner at Carla's house. A calculated move, one I didn't regret. Within hours, my phone lit up with a call from Martha, my cousin. "They're living in your house?" she asked, disbelief thick in her voice. "They told everyone it was a shared mortgage," I said. "Your dad lost his job, right? They said you were just helping with bills." "I bought the house outright," I replied. "I paid for everything, mortgage, utilities, insurance, for 8 years." Silence stretched, long and incredulous. "Good Lord," she finally said. "And they told Maya there wasn't room for her?" 26 people, I whispered. Martha exhaled. "That sounds like Helen." The dam broke. Within days, whispers spread in the opposite direction. The narrative shifted. Sympathy evaporated. Those who had shared Carla's post deleted it quietly. I didn't gloat, I just documented every shift like an ER chart. Symptom, cause, effect. Still, peace was temporary, because in families like mine, truth doesn't end the war. It only changes the weapons. By week 5, the house was quiet again. Too quiet. The phone barely rang now, except for spam calls and telemarketers. Even silence, I learned, can hum with threat. When the doorbell chimed one Tuesday morning, I nearly ignored it, assuming it was another courier. But through the peephole, I saw her. Carla, standing on the porch with a designer purse hanging limply from her arm, her face pale under perfectly applied makeup. I opened the door halfway. "You've got 5 minutes." She flinched. "Seraphine, please, can we talk? Alone?" I glanced over my shoulder. Maya was in the living room sketching, earbuds in, humming softly. Michael nodded from the hallway, a silent promise to stay close. "Coffee shop," I said flatly. "In 20. Carla arrived at the cafe exactly on time. She always did. Punctuality, control, appearance, her holy trinity. I'd come early, sat in the corner with a clear view of both exits, and started the recorder app under the screen of my phone. Sarah's voice echoed in my head. "They'll play nice to make you feel cruel. Let the guilt land, then let it pass." "You look tired," Carla began, sliding into the chair across from me. "Comes with sleeping better," I said, stirring my coffee. She blinked at the edge in my tone. "Mom's been a wreck. Dad can't sleep. Everyone's worried about you." "I'm fine," I replied. "They should be worried about themselves." Carla sighed theatrically. "This is breaking Mom's heart, you know. We're family, Seraphine. We need to stick together." "Family doesn't tell a 16-year-old she's not welcome at Christmas," I said, keeping my voice low but steady. Carla's spoon froze in midair. "That was a misunderstanding." I leaned forward. "Then why did Mom tell her she was expensive to keep entertained?" Carla looked down. "You know how Mom talks when she's stressed. She didn't mean—" She meant every word. Her lips pressed together. "Look, Mom was wrong, okay? But evicting them? That's extreme. You're throwing them out with nowhere to go." "They've had 45 days to find somewhere," I said. Carla's voice rose. "They're old, Seraphine. Dad's arthritis is worse. Mom can't handle stairs. You're really going to make them start over now?" I took a sip of water, unhurried. Their housing isn't my responsibility anymore. Carla leaned closer, desperation seeping into her tone. "What if I promise they'll change? Mom even said Maya can have a seat next time. Just stop this." I stared at her. "A seat?" My words cut quiet but deep. "You're bargaining my daughter's worth like it's a coupon." Her mouth opened, then closed. I reached into my folder and slid a single page across the table, a timeline I'd compiled, every date and event where Maya had been excluded. Birthdays, vacations, holidays, times she was left off group texts. I'd even attached a photo from Thanksgiving 2 years ago, showing the family table filled end to end, a single empty chair tucked into the corner of the room. Carla's eyes flicked down the list, but she didn't touch it. "Did you ever once stand up for her?" I asked. She didn't answer. The silence between us was the loudest sound in the cafe. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it." "That was your mistake," I said. "You thought I was still the sister who cleaned up after everyone." "Don't do this," she said weakly. "Once they're gone, you can't undo it." "Good," I said, standing. "Because I don't want to." Her voice followed me as I walked away. "You'll regret this, Seraphine. You always do." Outside, the winter air bit my face, sharp and clean. I texted Sarah, "Meeting confirmed. They're scrambling." Her reply came a minute later. "Good. Document. Don't explain." That night, the first of the anonymous letters arrived. Typed envelope, no return address. Inside, a single printed line. "Elder abuse is a crime." Michael read it twice, jaw tightening. "They're escalating." "Let them," I said. "They think threats will work because they always have." The next day, the hospital HR office called. Someone had reported a potential ethics concern about my treatment of elderly patients. The words were polite, the intent wasn't. Jennifer found me in the break room after the meeting. "Your mom called here, didn't she?" she said. I stared at my coffee. "Probably." "Management isn't stupid," she said. "They can tell this is personal." I smiled faintly. Helen Morgan's crusades never stay secret for long. That weekend, Pastor Thomas called again. His voice carried gentle fatigue. "Your mother's been asking for public prayer." "Of course she has." "I reminded her that public sin requires public repentance," he said softly. "And that applies to gossip, too." For the first time in weeks, I laughed, really laughed. But the laughter died when I checked my voicemail that night. Raymond's voice, my father, soft, halting. "We might have been too harsh on the girl," he said. "I'll talk to your mother. Maybe we can fix this." He hung up before finishing. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the first hairline crack in the wall of denial. I saved the message, not for sentimentality. Proof. Day 50 arrived with icy rain. I was reviewing patient charts when Sarah texted, "Family interference incoming. Prepare for escalation." I didn't have to wait long. That Sunday, 6 cars pulled into my driveway, one after another, like a parade of self-righteousness. Helen led the procession, flanked by Aunt Louise, Uncle Thomas, and a few cousins carrying casserole dishes like moral bribes. Maya peeked through the upstairs window. "They're all here," she whispered. Michael squeezed her shoulder. "Right on schedule." I met them at the door. Helen's eyes were already glistening, perfectly timed tears. "We need to talk as a family," she announced, sweeping past me as if the house were still hers. They filled the living room like a tribunal. Aunt Louise started the sermon. "Seraphine, we're not here to judge, but your parents are elderly." "Elderly doesn't mean entitled," I said. My father raised a shaking hand. "The Bible tells us to honor thy father and mother." I met his gaze, and it tells parents not to provoke their children to anger. The room fell still. Helen dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I never meant to hurt anyone. There must have been a misunderstanding about Christmas Eve." Maya, sitting beside me on the sofa, went rigid when Helen turned to her. "Think about your reputation, darling," my mother said sweetly. "Do you want to be known as the reason your grandparents lost their home?" I felt Maya's fingers twitch in mine. Michael caught my eye from across the room, his silent reminder. "Don't let guilt rewrite the truth." I drew a slow breath. "You told her there wasn't room, Helen. Don't try to rewrite that now." Aunt Louise's lips pursed. "Maybe just give them more time. 1 more month." "1 more month becomes 1 more year," Michael said. I looked at Maya. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Maybe we should let them stay, just until they find something." My heart twisted. Even now, she wanted to protect them. "They've had 60 days," I said softly. "They have savings. They have Carla's house." Maya's eyes filled. "They'll never stop, will they?" "No," I said, "they won't." The relatives exchanged uneasy glances. The room felt thick with judgment, as if oxygen had turned to syrup. Finally, I stood. "Meeting's over." Helen rose slowly, color high in her cheeks. "You'll regret this, Seraphine. Families don't forgive this kind of cruelty." I met her eyes. "Then I suppose forgiveness won't be another debt I owe." They filed out, muttering promises to pray for our hardened hearts. When the door clicked shut, Maya burst into tears. "Was I wrong, Mom, for saying maybe they could stay?" I knelt in front of her. "No, sweetheart, you were kind, but kindness doesn't mean surrender." Her shoulders shook. "I just wanted them to love me." "They never learned how," I said, pulling her close. "That's not your fault." Upstairs, the wind rattled the window panes. Downstairs, my decision settled into something solid, unshakable. We'd made it this far. 60 days were almost up. And this time, I wasn't backing down. Day 60 arrived the way storms do. Quiet at first, then with a certainty that no one could stop. The sky hung low and gray over our driveway as 2 cars and a small rental truck pulled in. Helen stepped out first, immaculate as always, her hair set, her lipstick defiant. Raymond followed slower, shoulders slumped beneath his old coat. There was no sign of Carla. I stood in the doorway with the clipboard Sarah had handed me that morning. The property manager, a broad-shouldered man named Ethan, waited in the hall behind me, documenting every detail with professional detachment. Sarah herself stood by the kitchen window, phone ready, calm as a surgeon. Maya and Michael flanked me like quiet pillars of resolve. Helen's eyes narrowed. "You're really doing this?" "I am." My voice didn't shake. "It's noon. You've had 60 days. She looked past me, as if expecting someone, perhaps the daughter who used to fold at her first sigh. "After everything we've done for you?" "After everything I've done for you," I corrected. 8 years' worth. Her lips thinned. "You'll regret this when we're gone." I handed her the papers. "I already regret the years I let you hurt my daughter." For the first time, her poise faltered. She turned to Raymond, seeking backup, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Instead, he looked at Maya, who stood beside me, chin lifted but trembling slightly. "We should have treated the girl better," he said softly, not to me, but to his wife. "We shouldn't have left her standing in that doorway." Helen spun toward him, furious. "Don't start that again." But it was too late. The truth had cracked the performance. She snatched the clipboard from my hands, scrawled her signature in angry strokes, and thrust it back. "Fine. We'll leave. You can explain to the whole family why your parents are homeless." "I already have," I said. Her face reddened. "You've ruined us." "No," I said evenly. You ruined yourself when you decided love had a price tag. Behind me, Michael murmured, "Let's get this done." Ethan opened the door wider for them to enter. Helen hesitated, realizing she no longer belonged in the house she'd ruled for years. Her heels clicked across the floor, hollow echoes in the rooms I'd once paid to fill with warmth. They packed faster than I expected. Most of the furniture belonged to the property, purchased by me when they'd first moved in with nothing to sit on. The rest fit into the truck with room to spare. Maya helped wrap fragile photos in newspaper, her movements steady, deliberate. She paused over one picture, her, at age 10, standing between Helen and Raymond in front of the Christmas tree. Helen's hand gripped her shoulder, a little too tightly, even then. "Keep it," I said quietly. Maya slipped it into a box marked personal. By mid-afternoon, the house was stripped of their presence. No scent of her perfume, no trace of their laughter, brittle and false. Just the echo of absence, and surprisingly, peace. Helen thrust the keys toward me, her hand trembling with anger she couldn't disguise. "Satisfied?" "Relieved," I said. Raymond lingered a moment longer, glancing toward the living room where Maya stood. "Take care of each other," he said softly. Then, after a pause, "and tell her I'm sorry." I nodded once. It was the closest thing to redemption I'd ever get from him. They drove away without looking back. The truck disappeared around the corner, taillights fading like the end of a long, cruel chapter. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was healing. Sarah gathered her files. "You did it," she said quietly. Michael wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "How do you feel?" I exhaled, the air shaking out of me like release. "Free." Maya's voice came from behind us. "So what happens now?" I turned, smiling. "Now we start over." That night, I stood at the kitchen sink, watching the last of the daylight vanish. The "for sale" sign Michael had planted in the yard earlier stood bright against the dusk. The house would sell quickly, Sarah said. Good neighborhood, solid structure, clean title. The money would become Maya's college fund, a new beginning carved out of old pain. When the phone buzzed on the counter, I didn't need to see the caller ID to know. I let it go to voicemail. Then I deleted it without listening. Some messages didn't deserve to be heard. Weeks passed. The silence became routine. No letters, no calls. Even Carla had gone quiet. Occasionally, a blocked number tried again, but each attempt faded faster than the last. One morning, an envelope arrived with no return address, only a neat, old-fashioned script. Inside was a single photograph. Maya at 8, holding a sketchbook, a drawing of our old backyard clutched proudly in her hands. On the back, in my father's handwriting, Grandpa's favorite artist. No note, no plea, just that. I set it on the mantel. Maya found it later and smiled. "Maybe he meant it," she said. "Maybe," I replied. We left it there, unspoken truce, frozen in a frame. 2 years later, the house we live in now is smaller, warmer. The windows let in morning light that spills across our kitchen table, the same table that once held eviction papers and bank statements. Now it holds college brochures, half-drunk mugs of cocoa, and stacks of Maya's art supplies. She's 18 now, stronger, brighter, unscarred, in ways that make me ache with gratitude. "Oregon State has an environmental science program," she says, excitement lighting her face. "It's perfect." Michael grins. "We'll support whatever you choose." I reach across the table, squeezing her hand. "You already know that." The doorbell rings, and laughter filters in before the door even opens. Jennifer and her husband Dave step inside, carrying cranberry muffins and too much joy for one doorway. They've become family, the kind that chooses you back. By evening, the dining table stretches to its full length. Friends fill every seat, the room humming with warmth and laughter. Maya moves between the kitchen and dining room, dishing out food with an ease that makes my heart swell. For a moment, I just watch her, how she smiles, how she belongs. The memory of that other Christmas Eve flashes in my mind. Her small figure in a doorway, holding cookies no one wanted, told there was no room. Now I look around this full, noisy table and whisper to myself, no empty chairs. Michael catches my eye and winks, understanding without a word. After dinner, Jennifer corners me in the kitchen. "My brother's still living in my spare room," she admits, voice low. 8 months now. I feel guilty kicking him out. I dry a plate, smiling softly. Your peace matters too. Sometimes the kindest thing is a boundary. Maya joins us, sliding in beside me. "Mom's right," she says. "Letting people use you doesn't teach them gratitude. It just teaches them that using people works. Jennifer laughs through the sting of truth. I'll remember that. My phone buzzes again, a text from a blocked number. The first words previewed on the screen. Hope you're proud of what you've done. Without hesitation, I delete it. No fear, no guilt, just peace. Maya returns moments later, clutching a large envelope. Mom, she says breathlessly, it came early. Her college acceptance letter. We open it together, hands shaking, tears catching light like small stars. Congratulations, I whisper. You did it. No, she says, hugging me tight. We did. Later that night, after the guests leave and the dishes are done, I slip a framed photo into Maya's overnight bag, a snapshot from last Thanksgiving. The table crowded with friends, smiles genuine, warmth real. I write a note and tuck it behind the frame. Remember who truly loves you. Before she leaves for her campus visit the next morning, I open my old journal, the one I began the night she came home crying from my mother's house. On the final page, I write, they said there was no room for my daughter at the table. Now there's no room left in our lives for cruelty. When Maya steps into the doorway, sunlight catching her hair, I close the journal and smile. We stand together, mother and daughter, whole at last, stepping into the light of a life finally our own.